I didn't kill anyone. I just decided not to subject my body to major surgery for a person who abandoned me, I retorted to my mother, who was facing a serious illness that required a kidney transplant. After 18 years of silence, she returned, not for a reunion, but to beg for a part of my body. My name is Ethan, I'm 30 years old, and this story goes back to when I was just 11. Although, to understand it well, we need to go back a little further. My parents separated when I was 9. At first, it was a typical divorce. Weekends with my dad, weekdays with my mom, both pretending to be cordial at school events while ignoring each other with a silent resentment that everyone noticed but me. My father was a plumber, an honest, hard-working man, the kind who always follows through. Many times, he'd arrive at my baseball games with grease stains on his clothes because he came straight from a job. That was him, someone who preferred to show up in a dirty uniform rather than break his commitments. He lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city, with a permanent scent of coffee and fresh-cut wood, an aroma that, over time, I associated with security. My mother worked as a medical secretary in a family clinic and was always obsessed with appearances. Even before the divorce, she criticized my dad's job, saying it wasn't up to the standard we deserved or that our neighborhood was unworthy, when in reality it was a perfectly normal area. After separating from my father, her obsession with status worsened. She started dressing differently, going out all the time, and complaining about absolutely everything. I was a kid trying to adjust to the divorce, but to her, I was simply in the way. When I was 11, Richard appeared on the scene, a financial advisor, or something along those lines. One of those jobs that sounds important, even if no one knows exactly what they do. He was the kind of guy who showed off designer watches and treated his car like a trophy. He had a BMW. He lived in a gated community where all the houses were identical, but cost a fortune. And he moved as if the entire world were a carpeted hallway just for him. I detested him as soon as I saw him, not because he was dating my mother. I had already accepted that part, but because to him, I was just an inconvenient lump that came with the package. When he came to pick her up, he'd completely ignore me. If he saw me watching television, he'd suggest to my mother in a low voice, but loud enough for me to hear, that the child should go to his room so they could talk adult business. If I tried to tell my mother how my day went, he'd interrupt with stories about his work or recommendations for exclusive restaurants. Every detail made it clear that I did not fit into the world he was building and into which my mother desperately wanted to belong. She celebrated everything he did, laughed at his silly jokes, looked at him with devotion, took his arm as if he were the most impressive person on the planet, and I, sitting next to them, disappeared a little more each day. 6 months later, my mother called me for a serious talk. I knew nothing good could come of it. She told me Richard had proposed and that he had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, Olivia and Sophia, 8-year-old twins. He had full custody because, according to my mother, his ex-wife had moved to Europe and practically left them behind. "Now we're going to be a real family," my mother said, as if what we had been before had been some kind of flawed draft. I asked where I would sleep, since his house only had 3 bedrooms, the master, one for the twins, and one for his office. She avoided my gaze and replied that they were looking at options, perhaps converting the garage or fixing up the basement someday. It was the same as saying, "We'll see if we can find somewhere to stick you." The wedding was 3 months later, extravagantly luxurious, with ice sculptures and a string quartet. I was part of the wedding party, but only formally. The twins, of course, were the center of attention as flower girls. The suit I was forced to wear didn't fit right, and I spent most of the day feeling alien to everything. At the reception, they put me at the children's table with the twins and some cousins I didn't know. Meanwhile, my mother and her new husband smiled from the head table, radiant, as if they had achieved the life they always wanted. And I, watching them from afar, felt for the first time that emptiness that would later become so familiar. Moving into Richard's house was worse than I imagined. The twins had the largest bedroom, with their own bathroom and a huge closet. His office remained untouched, of course, and I was assigned a sofa bed in a sort of storage room attached to the garage. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a junk room full of boxes with Christmas decorations and old furniture. That sofa smelled of mothballs and had springs that dug into my back. "It's temporary," my mother said, "just until we fix up the basement." The basement was never renovated. That sofa was my bed for an entire year. School became my refuge. I signed up for any activity that would keep me away from that house. Baseball, chess, after-school tutoring. I even helped the janitor just to delay the moment of going back. The janitor, Mr. Miller, was a good man. He let me organize materials in the storage room and talk to me about sports, studies, or normal things. Something I desperately missed at home. In that house, on the other hand, I was invisible. My mother poured all her attention into Olivia and Sophia. She prepared them elaborate breakfasts, pancakes in shapes, precisely cut fruit. While for me, she just left a bowl and a box of cereal. She spent hours helping them with schoolwork. She attended all their activities, organized birthdays that looked like corporate events. Her social media was full of photos of the twins as if they were princesses, while I barely appeared in the background. Richard also made no effort to hide that I was not part of his world. He had rules for everything, always strict and always directed at me. No TV after 8 p.m., no friends over without weeks of advance notice, no eating in unauthorized areas. The twins, however, did whatever they wanted. Late-night movies, impromptu visits, snacks all over the house. When I asked why they could and I couldn't, he replied that because I was older, I had to set an example. I was 12, they were 9. What example was I supposed to set from a sofa in a storage room? The worst part was seeing what my mother had become. She had always been a little superficial, but next to Richard, she transformed completely. She was like a programmed version of herself, perfect hostess, devoted mother, but only to his daughters. She gave them complicated hairstyles, took them shopping constantly, spent without measure on parties and activities, and boasted about every detail on her social media, as if her life was made only of perfect moments. I always remember one post my mother shared on her social media. "My beautiful girls, I feel so blessed being the mother of these angels." In those photos, she, Richard, and the twins, Olivia and Sophia, appeared, and I simply didn't exist. Not a mention, not a space for me. It was as if I had been erased from her life to better fit into her new family fairy tale. I was 12 when I first truly understood what it meant to not belong. One night, I woke up to use the bathroom, and as I walked down the hall, I heard murmuring coming from the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for my ears to catch a phrase that froze me. "The issue with your son," Richard said with a calculated tone, "he doesn't fit the family dynamic. The girls are confused by how withdrawn he is. He's creating a negative atmosphere." I wasn't withdrawn. I was simply surviving in a house where I wasn't wanted. I didn't hear my mother's reply, just a muffled murmur. Then came the final blow. "Maybe he would be better off living with his father," Richard continued, with the confidence of someone who thinks he knows everything. "Let's be honest, you barely see him. He's not adjusting to our family structure. The girls need stability. And having a moody teenager around doesn't help anyone." There was a long, cold silence that chilled my spine. Then my mother said, almost whispering as if it pained her to say it, "Richard, maybe you're right. Perhaps it would be best for everyone." I stood petrified in the middle of the hallway, trying to understand how my mother could talk about me as if I were a burden to be shipped off somewhere else. I went back to the sofa, in the little room I used as a bedroom, and spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling and feeling more invisible than ever. 2 weeks later, she called me for one of those talks where she pretended to be affectionate. She wore that soft, compassionate expression she used when she wanted to disguise selfish decisions. "Sweetheart, Richard and I have been thinking about what's best for you," she began. At that instant, I knew nothing good was coming. When an adult starts with "what's best for you," it almost always means what's most convenient for us. She told me she noticed I wasn't happy, that I wasn't connecting with my new stepsisters, that cohabitation wasn't flowing. She explained that my father had gotten a bigger apartment with 2 bedrooms, so I could have a real bedroom, not a sofa in a windowless room. "We think you'd be happier living with your father full-time." She then added that we'd still have visits, weekends, Christmas, the usual, though she said it without real intention. I asked about the supposed basement renovation she had promised to convert into my room. She looked down uncomfortably before saying they had decided it would be better to use that space as a playroom for the twins. They need a place for their toys. There was the unadorned truth. She was choosing her new husband and his daughters over me, and she wanted me to interpret it as a benefit to myself. "What if I don't want to go?" I asked, still knowing that a part of me did want to call that place an ex-home. She pursed her lips, as she did when she had made an unchangeable decision. Ethan, this is what's best for the family. The family, not our family, the family she had chosen to belong to. A family where I had no place. I moved in with my father the following month. He was genuinely happy to have me with him, although I could also notice the anger he tried to hide. He had found a larger apartment just so I could have my own room. He bought me new furniture and let me decorate it to my liking. He went to my games, my school events. After more than a year, someone seemed to want me around. Meanwhile, the visits with my mother began to fall apart. First, there were reasonable excuses. A twins recital, Richard's relatives visiting, plans she had forgotten. Later, the excuses lacked any effort. She was tired. It wasn't a good weekend. Maybe later. By the time I turned 13, I saw her once every 2 months, and each encounter was more uncomfortable than the last. It was always the same: fast food, superficial questions, constant glances at her phone, and then dropping me off at my dad's house with the visible relief of someone who had fulfilled an obligation. Finally, I stopped trying to maintain a real conversation. Why bother? She had made her choice. I had to learn to live with it. High school was better. Dad lived near a good school. I made friends. I officially joined the baseball team. I got a job at a hardware store. On weekends, I started dating a girl named Sarah, who thought my dad was the funniest person in the world. For the first time, I built something that wasn't tied to my mother's emotional chaos. My father never spoke ill of her, and I always respected that. Even when I complained because she forgot my birthday or canceled plans, he simply said that adults make mistakes, and I should focus on my own future. It was he who encouraged me to consider technical programs, who helped me with the paperwork for my electrician apprenticeship, who believed in me before I did. Meanwhile, my mother's life looked straight out of a perfect catalog. She constantly posted photos of her new world: Olivia and Sophia's dance recitals, family trips to Disney, Richard's work promotions, kitchen remodels, the twins' birthdays with magazine-worthy decorations. In all those posts, there was one thing in common: I did not exist. When I graduated from high school, she showed up for an hour. She posed for a few photos, congratulated me, and rushed off because the twins had an event she couldn't miss. I watched her drive away, and surprisingly, I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, just acceptance. That night, Dad took me out to dinner, and we toasted my future with a soft drink. That's what a real family should feel like. I threw myself into my job. Fortunately, I was good at what I did. I had a knack for understanding electrical systems and solving problems. By 22, I had passed the journeyman electrician exam. By 25, I had my master electrician license and was earning a good living, working on both residential and commercial properties. With my father's help, I bought a small house at 27. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. I renovated the entire thing: wiring, kitchen, bathroom. It was my space, built with my own hands. By then, I had been dating Clara for 2 years, a brilliant and funny teacher. She never minded that I worked with tools. In fact, she admired it. Her parents treated me with an affection that caught me off guard. They invited me to their dinners, asked me real questions about my life, remembered my projects and achievements. That's when I understood what had been missing for so many years: adults who care unconditionally. My life finally had stability: a job I enjoyed, a healthy relationship, my own house, and my father a few miles away. I had managed to turn the remnants of my childhood into something solid. And then, after nearly 18 years of minimal contact, my phone rang, showing a name I hadn't seen in a long time: my mother. The call from Richard came on a night when I was trying to distract myself by watching a series I hadn't finished in weeks. The phone vibrated with that number I didn't have saved, but recognized instantly. I hesitated to answer. I knew perfectly well it wouldn't be a comfortable conversation. Yet, sliding my finger to accept felt inevitable, as if I were fulfilling a formality everyone expected of me. "Ethan," he said with a tone that tried to sound cordial, but had a strange undercurrent. "Your mother told me you're considering helping her." I couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. Richard had always been correct with me, but he had also always remained on the sidelines, as if I were a footnote in the story of his perfect family. "I'm thinking about it," I replied cautiously. Look, I know your relationship with her hasn't been the best, he continued, but the situation is serious, very serious, and we don't have many options. We don't have. That phrase deeply annoyed me. I wasn't part of their we. I never was. I know, I said, just to not prolong the conversation more than necessary. Olivia and Sophia are very affected, he insisted. And your mother? He paused, as if looking for the best way to manipulate the emotional climate. She's devastated. I know she made mistakes, but people change, Ethan. I took a deep breath. My mind automatically returned to my adolescence. I remembered that sudden move after the divorce, when she dropped me off at my dad's house without a single honest conversation. I remembered her bright smile in photos with the twins, while I barely existed as a distant echo. Richard, this isn't simple, I replied in a firm voice. It's not a family discussion. It's major surgery. There was a heavy silence on the other end. You're right, he admitted. Just think that if you can help her, you'd be saving a life, and perhaps also a relationship that could be rebuilt. I was grateful he didn't insist further. When I hung up, I felt a strange mixture: indignation, sadness, exhaustion, and also a kind of lucidity. The emotional harassment wasn't just coming from my mother, it was coming from everyone: her daughters, Richard, the perfect circle that had always revolved around her. I was the last piece, the forgotten one, the one who never fit, except now, when an organ of mine could perhaps save her. Over the following days, the pressure increased. My mother started sending me photos of her treatments, images of her in a hospital gown, connected to machines, all accompanied by messages like, "Am I being strong?" or "The doctors say there's still hope." Sometimes she even added notes like, "I wish you could be here," although it was evident that what she really wanted was my kidney, not my presence. The conversations with Clara became more frequent. She was the only stable point amidst that emotional chaos. Every time she saw me tense, she'd make me tea or listen in silence, letting me vent without judgment. One afternoon after work, I sat with her on the sofa, as the sunlight slowly lowered outside the window. "Do you think I'm a bad person for not wanting to do it?" I asked her. "No," she answered without hesitation. "I think you are a person who was hurt, and those wounds don't disappear because someone has a medical emergency. But she's my mother." "Biologically, yes," she replied softly. "But a mother implies more than that. It implies care, presence, love, and you grew up without that." I was silent for a moment, feeling those words settle into a deep and painful place. "If I do it," I finally said, "and she recovers, what will happen next?" "Most likely," Clara replied with a frankness I appreciated, "is that she'll go right back to her usual life, to her routine, to her family. And you will be the son who helped, not the son she finally decided to love." That sentence was like a blunt but true blow. The messages kept coming. Every day there was something new: an attached medical study, a dramatic comment, a "thank you for considering helping," that made me feel trapped in an emotional debt I never incurred. Even the cousins with whom I had absolutely no relationship began sending me messages of support mixed with veiled pressure. Aunt Carol wrote me a long message, reminding me of childhood anecdotes in which I barely featured. It seemed more like an attempt to convince me that I had always been part of that family than a genuine affectionate memory. There were nights when I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like the whole world expected me to sacrifice a part of my body to correct mistakes they themselves had made for years. I wondered if it was fair. If I had the right to refuse without forever carrying the guilt of having let die someone who gave me life but didn't stay with me. What disturbed me the most was receiving a message from Sophia saying, "Mom always loved you, life just got complicated." That phrase left me motionless, because if it had been true, if she had truly loved me, she wouldn't have disappeared from my life for almost 2 decades. I decided to do something I probably should have done much earlier: inform myself seriously, not based on emotion, but on medical and legal reality. A friend of mine, David, worked as a nurse at the hospital. I called him and asked him to have lunch to talk about it. "Kidney donation is a serious thing," he explained as we ate. "It's high-impact surgery with real risks: infections, bleeding, clots, reactions to anesthesia. Most people do well, but most doesn't mean all. Plus, living with a single kidney involves permanent changes. There are medications you'll have to avoid. Your risk of hypertension and kidney disease increases over the years. And the recovery? I asked. 6 to 8 weeks before returning to a normal rhythm. And that's if there are no complications. That's 6 to 8 weeks of lost income, and you work for yourself. No one is going to pay you for that. And honestly, from experience, I can tell you that when family relationships are already bad, these types of processes usually make them worse, not fix them. That night, I made a list with 2 columns: reasons to donate and reasons not to donate. Reasons to donate. She is my biological mother. I could save her life. I would avoid guilt and judgment from others. It would technically be the right thing to do. Reasons not to donate. She abandoned me when I was 12. She chose her new family over and over again. She only came back because she needs something. It's major surgery with real risks, permanent changes to my body, loss of income during recovery. No guarantee of compatibility, even if donating. Nothing indicates the relationship would improve. I owe her nothing. The list was completely unbalanced, so I called her to ask to see her again. This time, I chose the place. A park near my house, quiet and without witnesses. When she arrived, I immediately noticed the hope in her expression, and it hurt to know I was about to disappoint her, but my decision was already made. "I'm not going to get tested," I said before she sat down. Her face lost all its illusion. "What?" "Why not?" "Because I don't want to. It's serious surgery with real risks, and I'm not willing to go through something like that for someone who hasn't been my mother for 18 years. "But I am your mother," she insisted, as if the words still carried the same weight as before. "You haven't been my mother," I corrected. "You stopped being one when you chose Richard and his daughters over me. You stopped being one when you sent me away because I didn't fit into your new perfect life. You stopped being one every time you forgot my birthdays, my events, my existence." She tried to justify herself. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I interrupted. "For 18 years, you hurt me simply by not being there, by ignoring me. And now you come back, literally asking for a part of my body. That doesn't erase everything that came before." She started to cry. "I'm dying, Ethan. Does it really mean nothing to you?" "Of course it means something," I replied, keeping my voice firm. "I'm not a monster. But your medical emergency doesn't erase 18 years of silence. It doesn't undo all the times you were a mother to others, but not to me. Needing something doesn't magically turn you into family." "Please," she pleaded. "I know I wasn't perfect, but I'm trying to fix things. Let me try." "You can't fix anything by asking me for organs. That doesn't work that way. If you wanted to repair something, it had to be years ago, when I finished high school, when I got my first job, when I bought my house. You had many opportunities to be my mother again. You never took them. So you're going to let me die?" she asked through tears. "You are not dying because of me. You are dying from a kidney disease. I am neither responsible for that nor obligated to fix it. You have the whole family you chose over me. Let them resolve your situation." I stood up to leave, feeling a closure that came very late, but had finally arrived. When she grabbed my arm, I knew immediately that this conversation wouldn't be short or simple. There was a desperate urgency in the way her fingers clutched my skin, as if that gesture could force me to change my mind just by feeling her pressure. "Ethan, please! Think about Olivia and Sophia. They need their mother," she said, her voice cracking. It was incredible. Even in such a grave situation, even when talking about her own life, she still revolved everything around the twins. Never about what our history had meant, never about what she had done to me, but about them. It was as if I didn't enter the equation at all. I was a spectator of a drama I never chose. I took a deep breath, trying not to let myself be dragged down by the emotional weight she was trying to put on me. "Well, I hope they find a donor," I replied with a calm that I didn't truly feel. "But it won't be me." I gently pulled away, though internally I felt something like a knot in my stomach. It wasn't hatred, it was exhaustion. It was the accumulated weariness of years carrying a history that no one else was willing to acknowledge. I left her there, crying on the park bench, and walked away without looking back. I knew what was coming would be unpleasant, but I never imagined how fierce the storm would be. I didn't even have time to get home before the phone started vibrating nonstop. Calls, messages, voice notes, all charged with judgment from people who were never present when it really mattered. They accused me of everything, of being cold, insensitive, cruel. Some directly told me I was condemning my mother and that one day I would carry that remorse to the grave. The first call I answered was from Richard, from a number I hadn't blocked yet. "You're killing her," he spat out, without greeting or context. "Do you understand? You are murdering your own mother because you can't let go of what happened." I felt my patience hanging by a thread. "I'm not killing anyone, Richard. I'm just deciding not to expose my body to major surgery for someone who abandoned me. And no, that's not the same thing." "She's dying," he shouted, as if raising his voice could change the facts. "Then maybe she should have treated her son better when she had the chance," I replied before hanging up. And then came the messages from the twins, each one worse than the last. The tone was different from Richard's, less dramatic, more venomous. Olivia wrote, "You are a horrible person. I can't believe you'd prefer to watch someone die when you could save them." Sophia topped it with more cruelty. "I hope you can live knowing you killed our mom." I blocked them without hesitation. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, but because I no longer had the strength to continue being the emotional target of a family that always saw me as a dispensable piece. Then Aunt Carol showed up, trying something more subtle. "Your mother made mistakes," she wrote, "but you should be the better person. Show her that you are bigger than her failures." But I had played that role for too long. I didn't respond. The only one who truly had my back was my father. He called me the next day with that voice that always managed to find a crack in any wall I put up. "How are you?" he asked, without beating around the bush. "Okay, I guess, though I feel like the worst person in the world." "You are not a bad person, son. You are someone who decided to set a boundary. The difference is enormous. People think you are letting your mother die, but none of them lived what you lived. They have no right to judge what you do with your body." There was a pause that warmed my chest. "I'm proud of you," he added. I couldn't imagine how much I needed to hear that. Clara, for her part, became a kind of protective wall. She answered my calls, blocked numbers, and one night even stepped between me and a relative who showed up at my door, determined to make me see reason. "This is harassment," she told Richard when he tried to push the door open. "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." He left, but not before spitting murderer at me as a farewell. The situation escalated even further on social media. Indirect posts, others not so indirect. Passive-aggressive phrases about the importance of family and people who choose not to help, even when they could save a life. I deleted all the apps. I didn't want to see any of it. 3 weeks after that conversation in the park, my father called me again. "It seems your mother found a donor," he said. I froze. Relief hit me like a wave. "Seriously?" "Yes. An organization that connects living donors with patients. She was on several lists. And finally, one was assigned to her. The operation is next week." I had to sit down. I felt something huge inside me finally loosen up. "That's good. Very good," I said, almost breathless. "I know. I thought you'd want to find out." I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't send anything. I just continued with my life, trying to mend the part of me that had been undone by so many accusations. The surgery went well. I knew this from the endless chain of comments the family posted in their usual spaces. Olivia and Sophia dedicated long messages to the angel who saved their mother's life. Not a word about me. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found my mother, thinner, paler, but clearly better than the last time. "Ethan," she said, "can we talk?" I wanted to close the door, but curiosity always gets the last vote. "What do you want?" I asked. She took a breath. "I wanted to thank you. The donor was a stranger who saw my story and offered. I'm going to live thanks to him." She paused, a long, almost heavy pause, and I realized something. I realized that I don't have a relationship with my son. "You were right. I chose my new family. I left you behind, and that was wrong. I was a bad mother. I am truly sorry." Her voice trembled, and for the first time in years, I wondered if I was truly seeing repentance or simply a belated attempt to correct what was beyond repair. The apology she offered sounded empty, almost mechanical, as if it only appeared now because she had finally obtained what she needed from someone else. It had no real weight or deep intention, just a belated attempt to soften something irreparable. "It's okay," I replied. "What exactly do you want?" She took a deep breath, as if preparing to unleash a transcendental truth. "I want to fix things between us. I want to be your mother again, if you'll allow me." I looked at her without blinking. "And why now? Because you feel guilty? Because you were near death, and that made you reflect? Or has the remorse finally caught up with you? Because I understood that I spent years running away from my mistakes. Instead of facing them," she said with a tremor in her voice, "I convinced myself that you'd be better off with your father, that my new family needed me more, that the past should be left behind. But you were right. I left you alone, I abandoned you, and I want to make amends." I observed the woman who gave me life, the same one who cut me out of it when I was barely 12, and who had only returned to my door when her need became urgent. And despite everything I should have felt, nothing appeared. No resentment, no relief, no comfort, just a serene emptiness. "I appreciate the apology," I replied, "but I can no longer be your son. That bond broke many years ago." "Ethan," she whispered. "I built a life without you," I continued. "A good life. I have a father who never failed me. I have Clara who genuinely loves me. I have a job I'm proud of, a house that is mine, and an environment where I fit in. There is no hole in my life that bears your name, because I filled that space with people who did stay. But I do care about you," she insisted, almost pleadingly. "Maybe now," I said calmly. "But you didn't care when it mattered. You didn't care when I slept on a sofa in a storage room. You didn't care when you missed my graduation. You didn't care for 18 years. I clenched my jaw before finishing. "I'm sorry you almost died, and I'm glad you found a donor. But I can't be your son just because guilt suddenly visited you." Her tears returned. "I can't change the past." "No, you can't," I replied, "and I can't forget it either. That's why it's better if we stop trying something that no longer exists. You have your family, I have mine. Let's leave it at that." "Don't shut the door on me, please," she implored. "You shut the door on me first," I said softly. "I'm just accepting what you did and moving on." I closed the door without remorse. This time, there was no guilt, just a deep and definitive liberation. That night, my father came over with takeout, and we stayed watching a game. We didn't talk about her or what had happened. We simply shared the moment as we had done hundreds of times. That, to me, was family, being there, accompanying, without needing explanations or conditions. Clara arrived late after a school event. She kicked off her shoes, grabbed a plate of food, and settled next to me on the sofa. "Your mother stopped by today," I told her. "Ah, yes," she replied, as if she had anticipated it. She apologized. Now she wants to form a relationship, now that she's better. "And what did you tell her?" "That I already have a family, that I don't need her to try to become something she never was." Clara squeezed my hand tightly. "You did well." A few weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. Sophia was getting married. It was addressed to me, and on the back, there was a handwritten note from my mother. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but it would mean a lot to the girls if you came. We'd love to have you there." I showed it to my father. He read it, shook his head, and gave it back to me. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. I'm not going." "Are you sure?" "Very sure. I spent too many years trying to be part of a family that never wanted to include me. I'm done with that." I threw the invitation in the trash. The wedding happened all the same. I saw photos on social media through acquaintances. Everything looked impeccable, smiling, perfect. My mother posted about her beautiful daughter and her perfect family. Not a mention of the son who chose not to attend, and to my surprise, it didn't affect me. That was their world, not mine. 6 months after that whole chapter with my mother, my life was moving in a clear and calm direction. One afternoon, as Clara and I walked on a trail near the lake where we usually went to clear our heads, I realized there was no point in continuing to wait for a perfect moment. The perfect moment was already there. She was by my side, laughing at something I couldn't even remember, with that naturalness that made any burden feel lighter. I stopped, took a breath, and pulled out the ring I had been keeping for weeks. I didn't say anything elaborate, just what I truly felt, that I wanted to build a future with her. Clara stood motionless for a second, and then she hugged me so tightly that I understood her answer before I heard it. We organized the wedding without complications, exactly the way we both wanted. There were no grand venues, no obligatory guests, no staged photos. We gathered in a small garden we rented for the afternoon, surrounded by those who had truly been there in the moments that mattered. My father, who couldn't wipe the proud smile off his face, Clara's family, warm as always, and our closest friends, those who had been silent witnesses to our story from the beginning. We didn't need anything more. It was a simple day, yes, but it carried an enormous emotional weight. For the first time, I felt like I was forming something authentic, my own, clean of old wounds. Shortly after the wedding, I received an envelope among the usual bills. It was a card sent by my mother. Nothing personal, nothing profound, just a standard congratulation, accompanied by a wish that we would find happiness on our path. I put it aside with the same indifference with which one sets aside a commercial flyer. I felt neither anger nor nostalgia. It was simply irrelevant. The years settled themselves. I focused on growing my business, improving the house Clara and I had bought together, and shaping the idea of having children someday. Everything began to take on a stability I had never experienced as a child. Occasionally, my phone still shows her name on the screen, but I don't answer. I don't open the messages that arrive on special dates either. I silently thank her for trying to maintain a minimum of contact, but I understood that I don't need to relive any of that. My life took a different path, one where she no longer has a place. With time, I accepted something that changed me internally. Real family has nothing to do with blood, but with those who choose to be there, with those who build with you, even when there is nothing to gain. Loyalty is not improvised, it is demonstrated. My mother ended up teaching me that truth, although she did so in exactly the opposite way she would have wanted.